foreign policies often affect domestic issues. During World War II, when the United States fought Japan and Japan fought the United States, Japanese Americans were sent to intern camps. When 9/11 happened, there was a great deal of Islamic phobia.
According to a website, Stop AAPI Hate, they logged in 339% increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans in 2021 alone. And the three cities that were the recipients of the largest amount of hate crimes was San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles, where there were the large concentration of Chinese Americans. See, whenever China and the United States are at odds, Asian Americans are always the first one to take the blame.
You are a veteran, yet you were put in jail because you refused to go to the war in Vietnam. Tell us more about that.
I realized the United States is asking me to go to Vietnam and do to the Vietnamese what the Japanese did to the Chinese in World War II. And that's when I finally decided I'm not going to do this no matter what.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Talk It Out with me, Li Jingjing. Normally, I do this show in Beijing, in Shanghai, somewhere in China. But this episode, I'm doing this show in San Francisco, in California, the United States. In this city, 40% of the population are Asian Americans, and the Chinese make up 1/3 of the population in the whole city. But when the relationship between China and the US deteriorated, Asian Americans are the first victims. They were verbally abused, physically attacked, facing incredible amount of racism. And now there are signs that the two countries are stabilizing the relations. Asian Americans, or Chinese Americans, can play a crucial role in bridging the gap between different communities, bridging the gap between China and the United States. So here in this room, I invited two California judges and a veteran here in this room joining me in this conversation. And you probably already noticed, all of the guests, including me, are Asians. The reasons, like I mentioned above in the beginning. So without further ado, let me introduce all the guests. So the lady sitting right next to me is Julin Tang. She's the retired San Francisco Superior Court judge. And she's originally from Hong Kong. And she witnessed the dramatic changes between colonial Hong Kong and the current Hong Kong. So she will tell us more about it. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Jingjing. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you. And this gentleman is Michael Wang, a veteran. So the National Vice President of Veteran for Peace. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
And everybody can see through your shirt, peace activists,
Yes.
Veterans for Peace.
This is the symbol of our national organization.
Thank you. And this elegant lady is Lillian Singh. She's the first female Asian American judge in Northern California. I think one of the few positions that Asian women ever achieved in the society in the United States. So congratulations and thank you for your contribution. And Lillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really a pleasure to talk to people in China. That's what we need, America and China. 对话.
Yes, dialogue exactly is what we need. Only by dialogue, by talking to each other, can we understand each other and bridging the gap. So first question is, like I mentioned in the introduction, Asian Americans collectively as a whole are the first victims. During the COVID years, during the whole deteriorations of the US-China relations, especially because of the China bashing narratives on mainstream media or some crazy politicians. So I would like to hear your observations. What happened? What did Asian Americans or Chinese Americans went through? How about we start with you, Julie?
Yeah, what you said is exactly correct, Jingjing. When the pandemic started and there were all kinds of rhetoric about China being responsible for the pandemic, and there was a lot of demonization of China that accompanied that rhetoric. Asian Americans, in particular, Chinese Americans, were the first group of Americans that felt the hostility of all of America, and we were on the first line of defense, so-called. As you said, according to a website, Stop AAPI Hate, they logged in 339% increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans in 2021 alone. And the three cities that were the recipients of the largest amount of hate crimes was San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles, where there were the large concentration of Chinese Americans. See, whenever China and the United States are at odds, Asian Americans are always the first one to take the blame. But on the other hand, when US and China are doing well, we are the first beneficiaries too. We really benefited in the last 40 years, financially, socially, and it was a very calm and very kind climate that we lived in. Although there's always racism underneath, there was nothing like what we experienced during the pandemic. Outright racism, hurting words that were hurled at us, ugly looks and stares, and then crimes that were committed, targeted in particular against Asians. So we're really glad that Xi Jinping is now here, President Xi Jinping is now here in San Francisco. And we think that by his presence here and the warm reception that America is giving him and being a special guest of President Biden, that we could ameliorate some of those things that have happened. And we look forward to a better relationship between US and China. And because again, we are the first recipients of all these US-China relations.
Do you two want to add on this topic, Lydia?
Yeah, I'd like to add that foreign policies often affect domestic issues. During World War II, when the United States fought Japan and Japan fought the United States, Japanese Americans were sent to intern camps. When 9/11 happened, there was a great deal of Islamic phobia. Now, when President Trump blamed the COVID on China and called it China COVID or Panda COVID and others. Anyway, so Chinese Americans were being blamed. And like Julie said, there's a great deal of anti-China hysteria. When my grandson, who is a top-notch soccer player, he is from Pennsylvania, he won the state, some kind of champion. When he was in a soccer room, the opposing team, whom he doesn't know, he's half American and half white, okay? But he looks, half Chinese and half white. He looks very Chinese. Somebody came and said, oh, we better leave. He's responsible for COVID. We don't want COVID. Those are personal experiences that affected everyone, including my family. So domestic relationships in the United States with any person who may not be white is affected by United States foreign policy towards that country. I really echo what Julie said, the US-China relationship needs to be improved. And when the United States and China are friends, I think it becomes a safer world for all of us. And we Asian Americans in the United States not only benefit, but we can lead that path towards a better relationship between the United States and China. Both Julie and I are very active in trying to improve US-China relationships.
I think what you mentioned is very important, and not only Asian Americans will benefit from this relationship. If you look at what China initiated in the past few years, either it's the Belt and Road Initiative, either it's the Global Security Initiative, Global Diversity Initiative, all those initiatives cherish the diversity of cultures and advocates the coexistence of diversities. No matter which culture, which country you come from, that we should respect each other because of the world will be much prettier with the different cultures. And the Belt and Road Initiative, it brought ports, railways, bridges, and those key infrastructures to those countries, so those countries can develop, have basic human rights of living as dignified human beings to achieve economic success. So it's really, everybody is benefiting from this. But conflicts will cause Asians being discriminated against, even like mixed race people. If you look a tiny bit like Chinese, you will be targeted. I'm not sure how everyone will react to this, because sometimes I notice some Asians, when they're being discriminated against, they tend to hate their own culture. Why am I being discriminated? Because my own culture is too bad, it sucks. So I should embrace whatever other cultures or the foreign cultures. So they lose confidence in their own cultures. It's not the only one culture is better than everybody else. I mean, everybody should be proud of their own cultures. But these conflicts make people hating themselves, hate each other. It benefits no one. So Michael, do you also want to add on this topic?
Yes, it was very difficult when President Trump was talking about Kung flu and the Chinese virus and that sort of thing. The most extreme and most violent elements of our society took that as a signal to go ahead and attack anybody who they thought was Chinese, which basically means anybody who looked Asian. And we were seeing on the news, videos of old man sitting on a walker. Person just charges them and knocks them off the walker and kills them. Women just being attacked on the street. There was an incident in which a mass shooter went in and murdered Asian women who were working in 2 different massage parlors. All these things were happening. And I'm a 3rd generation Chinese American. So I've been in this country all my life. And this was the worst I've ever seen, just like Julie said.
Really?
In the 50s, when I was growing up as a kid, I remember people saying Ching Chong Chinaman and making other racial slurs at me. We took that and we succeeded. We worked hard, we got our education. Our parents indoctrinated us that you have to work hard, you have to get an education, you have to succeed, you have to make the Chinese community look good. And as a generation, we did all that. So we prevailed over the stereotyping that existed in the 50s when you had white actors in yellow face pretending to be Chinese in the movies and just performing horribly and making a mockery of us. We survived all that. And then when new immigrants, like the 2 judges, came later on in the 60s and 70s, they worked hard and succeeded. So we put out a good image for the Chinese and for Asians, and we tried to turn it into a positive. And we thought for a long time that we had succeeded. For many years I didn't even think about it. I'm Chinese American, that's fine, it wasn't a big deal. I was working as a social worker and then as a peace activist. I was very active in Veterans for Peace. I became the national vice president. I was accepted as an equal. And then all of a sudden this happened. And that was a very painful time. I remember women coming to me, Chinese women and older people, saying how afraid they were. People were talking about, if I wear a mask to protect myself from the virus, is that going to incite people to attack me? So should I be more afraid of the virus or afraid of anti-Asian hate? It was a very, very difficult time.
I just wanted to add also that I came to this country as an immigrant in 1967. And in all these years, I have never felt the degree of safety that's been taken from me, the security that I've always had in this country, walking around, just being who I am. And of course, there's racism, but it's something that I could deal with. But right during the pandemic, and even now, there's still the vestiges of that going on, that you just feel very different. You no longer feel safe, and that's really scary. I think I want to also take it one step further. We've been talking about rhetorics that, like from Trump and other politicians, demonizing China and connecting the virus to China and Chinese people. I think it's even more deep-rooted than that. Sure, the rhetoric brings out the unconscious racism in a lot of people, and for some of the people who are violent, or prone to violence, they would take it out, on Chinese Americans. But the fact that this country views China as a threat, and not just a threat, but as an existential threat, meaning that my existence, it depends on your existence. Yeah. So if you survive, I don't survive, okay? Or if I need to survive and therefore we need to take you down or contain you. With that kind of mindset from both the mainstream media and also from the politicians, and that kind of become a pervasive, like a subconscious mindset that pervades throughout the society. And slowly people will look at Chinese Americans as, oh, you're Chinese and therefore you're part of the China that is creating a problem for us Americans, and you are threatening my existential existentialism here, and that becomes much more intrigue, much more difficult and much more dangerous to deal with. And as we agreed, I think here, unless US and China really work together and return us and reset the agenda back to where it was before 2018, before or even before Obama started his pivot to Asia, we're never going to have it easy in this country. That's why during the 2021, 20,000 scientists, Chinese American scientists, left this country. It never happened before. I mean, it's just the degree that they leave this country, the rapidity, how fast they left the country was just unseen, unheard of in all these years. And that's because America started focusing on specific groups of Chinese Americans. They go after the Chinese scientists. And they're concerned that the Chinese scientists were giving information to China, sharing classified information, when in fact they had no information on that, no evidence of that. And then the second group of people that they're going after was the Chinese tech workers. The tech workers who are working in China under the CHIPS Act. Chinese American or Chinese with green cards were not allowed to work in high-tech industry in China. You know about that, right? Yeah, so a lot of the high-tech workers came back to America. And it's unfortunate because at that time, people were laying people off, Amazon and all these Microsoft, Google were laying people off. So all these workers came back to a place where they were not even welcome. And then another group they're going after are people who are close to China because they really believe that China and the United States will work well together. And they brand them as agents. A Tibetan police officer was arrested and put in solitary confinement for 6 months and held in custody for a long time. And his case was just for no reason at all, or for some reason was dismissed entirely. And he was charged with the crime of being an agent of China, and for the simple fact that he was arranging banquets for them, arranging banquets for the Chinese consulate office to go into the community and meet the community. And there was also an allegation that he took money from the Chinese consulate office. Now we don't know where that allegation went because that case was just dismissed. Probably because there was no evidence of agency. But because of that, he was charged. He lost his job as a police officer. And right now we have, he's trying to fight for his job back, but it doesn't look very good for him. And then there was a hotel worker, union worker, who were also charged as under this agency law. And the agency law is so ambiguous. So what they're doing right now is focusing on different Chinese Americans and going after them. And with that kind of atmosphere, it makes everybody feel very unsafe in this country, no matter what you are, what you're doing. And it's just become not a safe country to live in and to pursue either education or career or social life. A lot of people are looking for options now.
Yeah, Lilian.
Julie has talked a lot about what's happening to a lot of people in the United States, but I think the phenomenon is that no matter how long you've been here, like Mike has been here 3 generations, we're always considered the forever foreigner. Even though you may have 3rd generation, been very successful educationally and professionally. But when the United States has a problem with the country of origin of that person, immediately that individual becomes a suspect. Is treated like a foreigner again, a spy for the foreign government, and therefore it's, that person's status in the United States is very much endangered. I'd like to also say that even though all these things have happened, there is a positive side to it, and that is Asian Americans have organized, have stood up, rose up, and demonstrated in thousands against Asian hate. So during the height of what Michael was talking about and what Julie was talking about against Asian Americans, with a lot of violence happening, and I must thank the media for showing the violence. Violence attack on senior citizens who happened to be just walking down the streets of San Francisco, pushed from the back, dropped to the ground, broke his head and died. That scene was played over and over in the media. It angered so many people. Asian Americans, young people, got together and united and rose up and started to demonstrate on the streets, thousands of it. And we have a banner right now in the biggest museum in the United States. It's a museum,
Smithsonian.
Smithsonian is a museum that actually showcased our banner. Thousands of Asian Americans got together and said, not, what does the banner actually say?
This is
Well, anyway, it's
Fight the virus, not the people.
I have a mask on my, actually that's on my cell phone. Fight the virus, not Asians, not the people.
Yeah, the
well,
banner
mine
said
is
not the people.
Mine is not Asians, but the banner says not the people. So in some ways, we have suffered a great deal, but on the other hand, we've also united, rose up, and fought back. And that is the strength of every kind of whenever there is a disaster, on the other hand, you find strength to try to do something about it. So your question about, and I like to follow what Michael and Julie said about, and what I said about foreign policies affecting domestic relationships. Because this is what we're talking about right now. And that's why President Xi and President Biden's meeting is so important to all of us, not only in the United States, but I think globally, to all the people in China as well. I think if the two presidents, if the two countries with the largest population, the most
biggest
powerful
economies.
countries, the two biggest economy, can get together and just dialogue, talk, hopefully our future will be better.
Maybe we can talk about, ask more questions to you, Michael, because you are a veteran. Yet you were put in jail because you refused to go to the war in Vietnam. Tell us more about that.
So I was in the U.S. Army beginning in the January '69, during the Vietnam War. The peace movement had been talking about how the war was illegal, how the South Vietnamese government was set up by the CIA, how they blocked internationally supervised free election that was supposed to reunite the two halves of Vietnam after the French left, and the war was completely illegal. It was a violation of international law, and it was immoral. And on top of that, the peace movement was also telling us that atrocities were being committed in Vietnam, rapes, murders, destructions of entire villages, this sort of thing. As a young college student, I didn't know what to believe. But then when I was in the Army, we were hearing from our sergeants, our instructors, soldiers who had just gotten back from Vietnam about what was really going on. And we were hearing firsthand stories, American soldiers murdering unarmed civilians. And we heard, and then the news broke in '69 about the My Lai massacre, where an American infantry platoon went into a small village called My Lai, and they massacred 503 old men, women, and children. And we saw the pictures of the women and children huddled together in a circle with the American soldiers surrounding them, pointing their weapons at them. We saw the pictures of the dead bodies afterwards piled in a heap. That confirmed everything that the peace movement had said and that our instructors and sergeants had told us. And in my unit and in units throughout the Army, people just rebelled at it, and there was a lot of rage and more stories going through the barracks. Most of us turned against the war. There was a huge movement within the Army of people just turning against the war. In propaganda classes, people would argue with the officers and the sergeants would have to order us to shut up. Just a lot of dissent. We almost had a riot in my platoon, my training platoon. So what I did was, when I finally got Vietnam orders after a year in the Army, I decided I wasn't going to go. I got a lawyer. I got 2 weeks leave to come home to San Francisco. And with my lawyer, I went AWOL for 2 weeks. I overstayed my leave by 2 weeks, turned myself into the Presidio stockade with my lawyer, refused orders. I had 15 years worth of charges against me. Because so many soldiers were choosing to go to jail rather than Vietnam, they were trying to force people to go to Vietnam rather than just filling up their jails. So they dropped all the charges, they released me from the stockade, put me back on Vietnam orders. I hid out for a little while, and realized, I'd tried refusing orders. I'd tried pressing what's called a limited conscientious objector case, which means you're not against legitimate national defense, but you're against a specific war. And they dropped all that. They refused to charge me. So I realized that my only choice was either I go to Vietnam or I go to Canada. And I had a really hard time making a decision. And I finally was going around and around in my head, and I finally decided I need to get away from this for a little while. I went to Chinatown to watch a Chinese movie. I didn't pay attention to what was showing. I just paid and walked in. It was a movie about World War II, and it combined live acting with old film footage of the actual war. And it showed these scenes where Chinese guerrillas were fighting the Japanese, and they were using the same tactics. The Japanese were using the same tactics that we had been trained on. The guerrillas were using the same tactics that we had been taught to expect from the Viet Cong. And I remember one ambush scene where it was the Japanese soldiers doing everything we had been trained to do. And they were ambushed and wiped out exactly as the Viet Cong were doing to American soldiers in Vietnam. And I realized the United States is asking me to go to Vietnam and do to the Vietnamese what the Japanese did to the Chinese in World War II. And that's when I finally decided, I'm not going to do this no matter what. And then I escaped. I deserted to Canada. I was there for 5 years. I got my bachelor's degree in social science there. And then at the end of the war, when Carter was talking about amnesty, I came back, refused amnesty, turned myself into the Army again, pleaded guilty to long-term AWOL, which was a deal that they had set up in Fort Dix, New Jersey. I was held for like about a week and a half, and then I got a summary court-martial and was processed out with undesirable discharge. There were different classes of discharge. The worst is dishonorable. A middle class was undesirable, which is what I had. And then, I became a social worker eventually, got my master's in social work, had a good career, and retired.
I just want to add on that because even though the World War II finished decades ago, but people in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, those Southeast Asian countries are still suffering the consequences of the World War II.
The mines,
Yeah.
And
So are the comfort women of China.
Yeah, and also just like for the war, because the U.S. Army used the chemical weapons, like orange, and now the women in Vietnam still giving birth to babies with all kinds of disabilities. Right. And during the Vietnam War, the U.S. Army dropped millions, 200 million tons, I forgot the exact number. They dropped millions of tons of cluster bombs, not just in Vietnam, but also Cambodia and Laos, just to kill all the commies. That's right. That's what they wanted. And so the thing with the cluster bomb is it will release hundreds of small munitions in a wide area, and many of them will not explode immediately, but they will explode, detonated once they were triggered. So nowadays, children in Laos, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, those children are still being exploded by accidentally playing in the garden and touch one of the cluster bombs. It's more evil because the bombs are designed with bright colors, designed to look like toys. So when children play in the fields, play in their backyard, when they see some shiny bright colors, they think it's some toys, they touch it and they explode. So many kids are still being disabled or killed by the leftovers of the World War II. So thank you that you didn't go to Vietnam, because the Asian people there are still suffering the consequence today, and they don't attract too much attention. So the experts estimated it would take probably 100 years to clear all the cluster bombs. Just to add on some historical backgrounds, what Asian people are going through during the World War II are still suffering today.
On the terrible.
50th anniversary of the My Lai massacre, Veterans for Peace had a tour of Vietnam. We went back to Vietnam, and we went to My Lai and attended the ceremony there to remember the massacre and the victims. Veterans for Peace, actually, we had speakers as part of the ceremony. And I remember that statue because it reminds me, when we built the Comfort Women statue in San Francisco to honor the Comfort Women of World War II, the feeling that I got from that statue was very similar to the statue that we built in San Francisco, the statue of the victims at My Lai. And when we went to see the museum and we saw that, we also toured orphanages of children who were born very deformed because of Agent Orange, like you spoke of. And Veterans for Peace sponsors a demining operation there. We raise funds for it and so on and pay for it. We watched them destroy an unexploded ordnance that they found. We saw children who were disabled by these things. It's very much alive. The thing about it is there's two sides to the American people. There's the horrible war criminal side, sponsored by our governments and our politicians and our military-industrial complex and the big defense contractors. But there's also the very human side of the war, where so many American soldiers refused to participate in these atrocities and rebelled against their officers and even sometimes killed their officers. It was called fragging. It was when you used a fragmentation grenade to throw into an officer's bunker. And I remember at My Lai, they showed the two sides in the museum. There was, all the pictures and documentation of the massacre itself. And then there was the story of Hugh Thompson, who was an American helicopter pilot, who at the very end of the massacre, when the final survivors were fleeing and the American soldiers were pursuing them, he dropped down with his helicopter and intervened, landed his helicopter between them, had his men point their weapons at the other American soldiers and ordered them to stop. And that enabled the final survivors to get away. And that his picture and his story was in the museum. So, and then they also had a display of all the American soldiers who resisted the war in different ways. And they had our pictures up, including mine, our pictures and our stories up. So anything that Americans do now to prevent a war with China or any other wars, people remember that. There's the other half of the American people, the American side.
We have to talk about the other victims of the World War II, is the women. You two ladies are the co-chairs of the Comfort Women Justice Coalition. To those who don't know the history, many women in Asia, either it's Korea, China, Japan, Philippines, across East Asia, Southeast Asia, many women were taken by the imperial Japanese soldiers to use those women as sex slaves, basically. Too many women were the victims, yet this still haven't got any apologies from Japanese government or Japanese soldiers. So I know you've been doing all the work, everything you can to let people know this history. And so can you tell us more about it, Lillian?
I actually retired as a judge just to start this movement with Judge Julie Tang. At that time, she was already retired, but she was still serving as a assigned judges program that we have for retired judges. She was already involved, and she asked me to join her, and I did. I love my job as a judge, but I retired from my job just to join her to start this movement. We both feel that most Americans know about the atrocities that happened in World War II in Europe, but so few people know about what happened to the atrocities of World War II in Asia. The atrocities include capturing hundreds and thousands of women and forcing them to serve as sex slaves to the Japanese Imperial Army, but also included forcing Chinese citizens to serve as lab victims for war germs injected into their bodies and to see what the effect is, as well as the horrifics that happened during the Nanjing seizure and the rape of Nanjing, which was a book written by our good friend Iris Chan. So we feel that it's really important to educate the public, the world, about history. If they don't know about history, history will be repeated. Unfortunately, the Comfort women are dying. They are more in the 90s. Most of them are dead. We want to preserve the history so that the future generation can learn about it. So Julie and I were just in China last month to go to the Nanjing Li Jixiang Comfort Women Stations Museum, where we actually have a program called Eternal Testimony. We recorded a former comfort woman who's now in her 90s. She's blind, probably by the chemical weapons that the Japanese threw into the water when she was 9 years old. And she was captured to be a slave twice by the Japanese Imperial Army. But now in the 90s, she's brave enough to talk about her past. So we started a program with the Jewish Show Foundation and the Korean Kim Foundation and also the Nanjing Museum to preserve her testimony. And now we have a testimony using AI technology where you ask a question and she will answer your question in real time. That will be preserved for the future when she's long gone. And the future generation can ask Pan Nai Nai, what happened to you? And she can tell her story so future generations can learn about it. So we are very passionate about preserving history, teaching our young people and everybody about the horrors of war and why Michael is so passionate about his work in preserving peace and how we are trying to work for peace and not war. Because war is terrible. And the victims of war, a lot of us, women and children.
Exactly.
There's a famous saying that says that those countries that do not remember their history are condemned to repeat it. You know, when I'm seeing what's going on now throughout the world, in Israel and in Gaza and the Russia and Ukraine military operations, I'm so sad because I think women and children are the ones who bore the brunt of that war, in addition to young men in their best ages, you know, from 18 to 30. These are the first line of victims, and where you have older men and older women making those decisions, how they should fight, you know, where they should fight. I think that what we're doing is not just to preserve history, which is important, but to also, as a lesson for the present and in the future. While we're talking about war being looming, especially with the US-China Cold War happening, and at some point, you know, when America continues to issue sanctions against China, there was like not even a break at any time. At first it was the technology sanction, the trade sanctions, then technology sanctions, and then now it's business sanctions, and it's unending. So as you said, Jing, that let's hope that at this APEC conference, that the two heads of states are doing something, are really doing something for peace. America, we have been a forever war country, and we have a military-industrial complex that is churning out weapons after weapons, and they're the largest producer of manufacturer in this country. We have lost the edge in manufacturing. At one point, our textile manufacturing, our electronics, and we have so many wonderful things that this country produces. We are one of the largest exporters, and now we're losing that edge. And our largest export right now is weapon. I don't want to see my country like this. You know, I mean, this is a country that we lived here for a long time. I was educated here. You know, I got my degrees, and then I also became a judge. So I'm part of the government, you know, of this country. And we treasure what we have. We treasure the family that we build in this country. And we just hate to see all these decisions made by our leaders that trickle down to us that would hurt me, my family, my society, and everybody around us. And because America is so influential, we are such a superpower. Every decision that we make, everything that happens to us, also has the effect global-wise. So, and then I see the Cold War, where the United States has been pretty much the aggressor here, you know, pushing China, and then China keep, you know, backing off, and saying that, yeah, we're, you know, just hold out fear, and hold out temperature, and we'll work it out. It's a win-win thing. Let's make it a congenial thing for us. Let's just start really talking and dialoguing. And America just kept passing these laws, one after another that would contain China and sanction. Right now, we're sanctioning like 10,000 people worldwide or something like that. We just don't stop sanctioning people. We're warring. We're bombing Syria. We're involved in the Russia-Ukraine war. We're involved with the Israel-Palestinian war. We just came off Vietnam. We just came off Iraq. And now we're trying to and look at what's happening in Middle East and with Iran situation. We shouldn't be where we are. We really should not be where we are. And if the leaders truly love us, love the people that they are serving, they would stop this kind of behavior and reset the agenda. And we don't need to be hegemon. But if we want to be hegemon, I know China is happy to let us be the hegemon. But let's not have war. Let's have peace. And let's worry about the children, the women, and all the young men that go to war. And this is what's really on my mind and our minds a lot these days.
I have a question specifically for you, Julie, because, many young people from Hong Kong are not satisfied with what happened in Hong Kong in the past few years. And especially many, like we call it separatists, or those who claim they want independence for Hong Kong because they want Hong Kong to go back to a free society which has real democracy. But you've been through the colonial era of Hong Kong. And just a few months ago, last month, you also went back to China. You also visit Hong Kong SAR. So you see the current Hong Kong as well. Can you share with us your experience, your observations?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong during the colonial times. And we went through a period where the British Empire had all the power and authority over the colony of Hong Kong. We had no electoral rights at all. The governor was appointed by England, and he had all the rights and powers and authority to appoint the public officials. England practiced a thing called a benevolent dictatorship, in which they will hold the country very tight. At the same time, they'll give you a lot of freedom to thrive economically. So the Chinese people, being as industrious as they are, and also very entrepreneurial, and they are very good merchants, they enjoyed this freedom, market freedom, and where they were able to build up a very prosperous Hong Kong. At the same time, the Hong Kong government, it's always reigned superior. And I think what is very damaging actually to the Hong Kong colonialism is that the colonial mindset just pervades throughout the 150 years of colonialism by the British, that they felt that white people are superior and that they felt that everything Western is superior. Because we did enjoy a period of prosperity and peace, while China was undergoing civil war, famine, and their own internal strife. We were shielded, and we had this peaceful society where we can thrive and develop and cultivate. I always never felt comfortable in Hong Kong growing up as a teenager. I always felt stifled, and that there has got to be a place where I can breathe easier, because you don't have a citizenship. Jingjing, you're a Chinese citizen, and you're very proud to be one. I'm an American citizen, and I'm proud to be one too, because I have a country where I can say I'm a citizen. And I'm also proud that whenever I go back to China, they accept me too, also as a daughter, of the country. This kind of thinking is very damaging to the psyche, because when you don't have a citizenship, when all you have is a passport that says that you can go to England, but you cannot stay there. Okay, you can go there for temporarily, and then you cannot stay there. Meanwhile, there was no right to vote for the Chinese people in Hong Kong. The rights came about a few years before Britain left Hong Kong. I think that's a poison pill that they put there, just to make it hard for you.
They always do that.
Yeah, that's the poison pill.
Every colonies.
Right. And so a lot of these young people in Hong Kong feel that, wow, they want to be, British, they want to be westernized. They carry the Union Jack flag, they carry the American flag. They don't know what we went through when we were, thick in the colonial mindset. For example, when we go to movie theaters, we have to stand up for the national anthem the British national anthem. Can you imagine? And all these Chinese people had no idea what they were standing up to, but they were required to stand up, and then they play the British national anthem, and when it's done, and we all sit down, and they have a picture of the Queen Elizabeth. They have no connection with that, but they were required to do that. And all the good jobs in the high government went to the English people. And in the beginning of the colonial period, Chinese people were not allowed to live in the peak area or the mid-level. They were required to live in the lowlands, because that's reserved for the British people. And also at that time, they used, in the early days of the colonial period in Hong Kong, they adopted China's feudal punishment under the Manchurian dynasty. So they used very harsh punishment against the Chinese people, and the British people were exempt from that. The British people had their own set of laws, and the Chinese people had their own set of laws. Eventually, that was removed. A lot of the people who talk about riots of 2019 did not know that in 1965, there was also a huge riot, but the riot was against the British government. It was a pro-China riot. And in that riot, the British government handled it very harshly. They just mowed down people, they killed people. About 70 people were killed. And in this last riot in 2019, not one person was killed by the Hong Kong government. I think that they should really appreciate what they have, and the democracy and the freedom that they enjoy now was something that I didn't have when I was growing up as a part of the British colony. I didn't have that freedom. I didn't have the freedom to vote. They can vote now, okay? They have their own electoral voting system where they can participate in voting for the governor and also for district representatives, as well as for the broad legislative offices. And they can run for office, and they have freedom of speech. They can say whatever they want to say, and as long as they do not commit what every country forbids, and that is seditious behavior, terrorism, and also there's one more which I forgot now. But these are the things that all countries would not tolerate. And now, and that's what they have. And yet they are saying that, oh, we want the independence, we want freedom. I think they are being used. They are really pawns. And I hope that they can think clearly in their minds, go back to Hong Kong and enjoy what you have right now, and not live in that narrow sphere of fantasy land, where you're dreaming of something that no country can offer you, that you can go in and burn the flag and burn the offices and take down the government and demean the people that are offering you services. No country will offer you that and allow you to live freely in such an atmosphere.
I just want to add on that, the comparison of the riots during colonial rule and after Hong Kong was returned to the mainland. Because you said the protests against the British government, the colonial rule, the British government used very harsh punishment to the rioters, to the protesters. But during the riots in Hong Kong in 2019, not a single bullet was fired from the Hong Kong police. They only used a rubber bullet, tear gas. And the police was very refrain, actually. They were the one who got beaten up, got encircled, attacked. You said there were no people killed during the riots in 2019. Actually, there were. But it was the people who called out the rioters. You are destroying our city. Yeah. And the rioters, the young students, lit the old man on fire, killed him live with fire. Another old man also got killed because the young protesters threw a brick to him and killed him. The casualties of the riots were the average citizens of Hong Kong who just love this city and don't want to see riots. So I mean, the contrast of these two riots basically tells the difference, right? Lydia, you want to add something?
Very minor. That is the overall feeling that the Chinese people are now really proud. We are very proud people. We've been suppressed so long, for so many centuries, by the foreign powers in China during the Qing dynasty. How the Opium War started, how Hong Kong became British colony was because of the British foreign government's control of China. China was so weak in those days. So it's a long chapter, but I would summarize it very shortly by saying, we want China to be strong. When China is strong, we all feel good. So it is very important that foreign government no longer treats Chinese as dogs, as slaves. This is why no matter where you are, Chinese Americans, British Americans, Canadian Chinese, all want China to be strong, because our mother country strong will make us have a better life in a foreign country. But also we are proud people. We want a proud mother country from where our birth country is. And this is why we're so proud of Xi Jinping, because he's done so much during these 20 years, rising China to a level that is equal to the United States, and some very important levels better than the United States. I like Julia. I'm very proud to be American citizen. I love my adopted country, but I also love the country that I was born in. And I'm very happy to be a Chinese American.
It's not about one culture dominate another culture. It's about, it's also part of my culture. I should have the right to be proud of my own culture, right? Like you can be American, you can be Chinese, and you can be Chinese Americans. Like there are both of us. And having a better, when our home country has a better economy, better status, we are also being treated at least as equal human beings.
And also, just to add to that, that the Chinese in Hong Kong, they have a country now that I didn't have. Okay, England was not my country, but now they can say China is their country. They are so lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. What you said is awesome. Mike?
If I can make one quick point. Comparing the January 6 riots in Washington, D.C., that was one day. The people there did not use firebombs. They were not throwing bricks. They did not kill anybody. The rioters did not kill anybody. But the police killed one person. And since then, the crackdown on those rioters has been very strict. People are getting like 18 years in prison. That was one day. The Hong Kong riots went on for 1 year. No policeman killed anybody. The Hong Kong security law and the American security law are very similar. If anything, the American security law is actually somewhat stricter. So, when you talk about democracy versus authoritarianism or dictatorship, we need to ask who's talking about who, Just compare the two. 1 year, firebombs. 1 day, no firebombs. What's the consequence?
And you talk about the Washington, January
Washington
6th.
versus Hong Kong.
Thank you so much, all of you. I've learned so much from you, and I really love your contributions to the whole world. It's not just for Chinese. So I know that I have a lot of followers, Asian American followers actually. I just found out in the past few months. And I do have a lot of followers in America, in different states. I hope those of you who are listening to this among the greatest human beings on earth can learn the history from them, learn what they're doing to make the young generation's future much better, and be proud of yourself, be proud of your own culture. All of you should learn from them, and because like you said, the older ones are destroying the future that belongs to us. So we should be the one that stand up for the future that belongs to us, right? So let's go make a change. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Gigi.
so
Thank
much.
you.